Hello, welcome to another interesting episode of Trace and Quits, Ade and Joe. We have on this specific episode we have interesting guests in the house. Our first guest actually. It's nice to actually have someone else, an expert also in this space to talk about a bunch of other stuff. We have William joining us today, or as he loves to be called, Will, and but also before I kind of go into introducing him or asking him to introduce himself, part of the stuff we're going to be talking about today includes like an update on Roman Storm, the verdict itself, and all of the different possible verdicts you can think of actually came out in all of those three different charges. So it's an interesting one. Then we talk about Monero itself and something that is happening on that front, and end it up with the Lubian arc as published by Accounts Intelligence. On that note, Will, nice to have you here with us. At least thank you for honoring us, and nice to have you. Yeah, please take it off. Tell us a little bit about yourself. We've been connected on LinkedIn for I have no idea, but for our listeners and viewers out there, yeah, please let us know who you are.
Yeah, and thanks so much for having me on. And that always trips me up a little bit when people say experts because I don't think of myself necessarily as an expert. And I feel
Same
like
here.
that gets thrown around a little loosely, a little bit. But generally, I think in this industry, right, like we're always finding out new stuff, and
Mm,
you know, somebody has a little bit of knowledge in a certain area that you don't. You just learn all the time. But thanks for the term. But yeah, a little bit about myself. So I work at a company called Heights Labs, and we're a blockchain data analytics company that helps out law enforcement and intelligence services to um, kind of unmask a little bit of a little bit, a lot of all the bad actors within the industry. Um, so that's my full time job. I'm their director of special programs and investigations. Um, and then I'm also a national security fellow for the Bitcoin Policy Institute, where I research uh, illicit use of crypto, specifically around sanction evasion, um, generally money laundering, terror financing, things like that. And then in what spare time I can find, I also help out with Operation Shamrock and
yeah.
co-lead their triage team under the law enforcement working group. So busy times as always.
Yeah, nice, nice. Yeah, I think you've mentioned quite a number of like interesting stuff that like possibly maybe our listeners are aware of. Operation Shamrock, for one, I think is an interesting initiative, and yeah, what you guys are doing on that front, I have no insight into it to be honest, and but I think like just from watching some of the videos by the team and what you guys put out, I would say it's like a very laudable thing. Yeah, you want to say something
Yeah,
on that,
super
Joe?
cool.
Yeah.
No, yeah, super cool. It's yeah, Erin West, I believe, right?
Yes,
Yeah, she's
yes.
all over my LinkedIn, and I believe she just released like a new podcast as well, and something people should check out. I actually still have it on my list to do, but yeah, if you're listening and you haven't done that, I would definitely recommend doing so. So yeah, really cool to hear that you're also involved with that too, William. That's awesome. It seems to be doing a lot on a lot of fronts. So excited to have you here. You're actually our first guest, so hopefully this is a format we can do in the future. And yeah, excited to have you on. So yeah, let's get started. Should we dive into the first topic of the day?
Yeah, just kind of like stopping from where we'll starting from where we stopped. So regarding their company, and I think you mentioned something about Bitcoin Policy Institute. I believe that is, yeah. So just for our listeners out there, so they released, I'll probably say Will himself and the institute released an article earlier this week, and would can you share more about what that article is all about and some of the key points, just for listeners to go and read more about it?
Yeah, definitely. So I'd mentioned I'm researching a variety of topics around kind of Bitcoin, but also crypto generally, and the nexus it has between national security. So, um, kind of finished up my first research blog or article, whatever you'd want to call it. And it's titled Tornado Cash, where code, privacy, and sanctions collide. And yeah, it just kind of gives an overview of what's going on the legal side of privacy protocols. There's obviously a lot of conversation going on around Tornado Cash, you know, Samurai Wallet, and a variety of other privacy protocols, and kind of the legal um, battles that they've found themselves in. So it's been a hot topic, and I wanted to take a look and kind of um, give some oversight around the data, how it's being used, who it's being used by, um, and then kind of the more bird's eye view also of how it's affecting the crypto community and also U.S. national security. Just finished it up and published it, and I'm looking to do a part two, and kind of get into a little bit more of the legal aspects and repercussions of it. So stay tuned for that. I normally don't cover legal stuff, but it is important. So I'm hoping to follow up with something around those kind of topics as it pertains to privacy protocols.
Yeah, for full disclosure, we're not lawyers or legal experts, but you know, so take that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I should say this, that um, all of what I'm saying isn't necessarily the opinions of Heights Labs or Operation Shamrock or BPI or any of the other uh,
Yeah.
organizations that I constantly put the hats on and take off.
Yeah.
Cool. There's actually one. So I was reading it, and then there is one part which I find very interesting, and I think that is the um I think it's loosely titled. The way I can remember is like, was sanction effective on Tornado Cash itself, where you sort of like compare the numbers of pre-sanction, post-sanction, well, pre-sanction, during sanction, even after sanction, after the sanction was lifted. Like, I find that really interesting. Can you share a little bit more about that, just so people can like understand it's actually sanction effective in that regard?
Yeah, definitely. So, um, I was trying to take a look, and give as much as I can within the article, a nuanced look at the user's behavior before, during, and after sanctions. Because I think you can gather a lot of kind of user intent and general, kind of industry um, insights around that time. And and so the way that I went about collecting a lot of the data, which is really nice working for a blockchain data analytics company. So they graciously allow me to utilize some of the data for research purposes with BPI. So I took a look at you know um, usage before, of course, sanctions and what that looked like, and kind of got an idea of illicit flows moving through and out of Tornado Cash, as well as during sanctions and then after. And one of the really unique things that stuck out was that obviously before Tornado Cash was sanctioned, it was about 30 to 40% of funds going into it were uh, illicit, and then the interesting thing was, when they were sanctioned, that of course, the overall usage and people using and sending in flows to Tornado Cash dropped significantly, but it was primarily users that cared a lot about privacy that didn't have illicit funds or weren't sending illicit funds. Let me rephrase that so it's a little more simple. Illicit funds, in comparison to licit or normal funds, was much lower than pre-sanctioned. So um, and I need to stop saying illicit and licit because when you say them, sound very similar. But yeah, during the sanctions, usage dropped off in short, and then there was a higher volume of illicit activity still going through in comparison to before. And of course, just again, the overall ceiling dropped quite heavily. So it was interesting to see that bad actors were kind of still going into that, and they made up a larger portion of funds going into Tornado Cash than before because they, I guess, didn't care. But it's a really nuanced and interesting kind of like data point to look at and then try and build conjecture around like why. And then also, of course, um, when the sanctions ended, to kind of see the return of everyone to go use it. And of course, it rose again. And then with the legal battles that were going on, it coincided with a lot of industry support for privacy use case. And that's kind of something that I want to dive into the part two, kind of this idea of anonymity versus privacy, because I think there's two different things, and there's a way that we can, um, as an industry, kind of support privacy while also kind of acknowledging that bad actors utilize tools just like they do with cash or the dark web or a variety of other technology out there. But how can we as an industry adapt with our own technology that we're creating and ensure that bad actors aren't using it?
Yeah, I think it's very, yeah, that's like a very interesting case. Just last thing from me on this one, it's like it just goes to show like put sanctions, red tapes around it, whatever, uh, fraudsters and hackers and the likes will still use it regardless. They actually don't care. And in a way, for people, it also makes a little bit of sense, right? Because like for people who are actually using it for privacy reasons, in a way, I'm kind of just assuming that at the end of the day, it means that the funds is still going to end up in like a centralized exchange. And if Tornado Cash itself has been sanctioned, the outflow from Tornado Cash exchanges probably would perhaps just block it when it gets to their platform. That's kind of like speaks a little bit of sense to why it reduced during that period that it was sanctioned. Like, but yeah, I think that was a good one. Yeah, Joe.
Yeah, no, I mean, great insights, Will, and yeah, I'm really fat. What was it? I can't remember if it said in the blog, but like the current, like once the sanctions were taken away, what was the proportion of like illicit transactions to like non-illicit transactions? How did that look again? I'm not sure if I recall reading just the most
Yeah,
recent update.
that data is a little bit more difficult
Mhm.
to get right now. We're still ingesting and getting data for that, so I don't have I don't think I even directly quoted a specific number, but there's been and then again with the legal battles that are ongoing, tons of supporters started using it again. So it's rose again as far as like legitimate users, if you want to call them that, that are using it in non-illicit ways. So it's risen quite a bit, and I'm trying to put together. I think that's also something that I'll probably do in a part two is give an update on the data post. sanctions. So yeah, stay tuned for that. But it is a pretty significant amount of funds that are continuing to kind of move through there. And as far as um, not only Heights Labs, but I think a variety of other blockchain analytics companies are showing that they're legitimate users. But again, I think it's a result of people in the industry supporting privacy protocols generally.
Cool. I think this will be like a very good segue uh to the other side of Tornado Cash, basically, which is like the Roman Storm case. And I think 2 weeks ago, or roughly 10 days ago, I can't remember specifically, there was a verdict, and that was delivered, and essentially it was okay, what a tongue twister. Acquitted of money laundering and sanctions evasion charges, but found guilty of operating an unlicensed money transmission business, which, from the look of things, can carry up to 5 years in prison. But also, from what kind of like the body language of the judge, looks like they should possibly appeal this, and most likely, well, I can't. Well, they should possibly appeal this based on the body language of the judge, right? So, it remains free pending, um, free on bail pending sentencings. But what's your take generally on this? Because, in my opinion, I feel um going sort of like getting found guilty on any of those three charges is generally going to be like a very, very bad precedent for the ecosystem. And it's not just only going to be a tornado cash thing. Um, the likes of Uniswap, as long as you're like a decentralized protocol, whatsoever you're doing, you're more likely going to get tangled in this sort of like verdicts. What's your take, guys?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll jump in. Will, just my first impression is I think it's good for Roman Storm for the most part because he was
Mm-hmm.
facing like
45.
like yeah, yeah, decades in prison and this sort of
Yeah.
thing, and now it's significantly reduced. I think two of the charges were like a hung jury, and then the one that stayed was surrounding running a money transmitter. From what I understand, again, not lawyers, so take it with a grain of salt. But yeah, it seems really I don't know, unjust in a lot of ways because apparently the definition of what a money transmitter was switched a few years ago during the former administration to sort of be perceived as like hard on money laundering and specifically North Korea, I think it was. So a lot of people are saying this was sort of a political trial rather than a legal trial. And therefore, this switch up of what a money transmitter means gives a lot of good reason for Roman Storm to appeal and hopefully be successful in it. And yeah, I think the what was switch was about whether or not you facilitate a money transmission or have control over a customer funds. So yeah, I think it switched to simply facilitating transactions is enough to be considered a money transmitter, which was not the case previously, and even from FinCEN's guidance, like I think specifically in 2019, Tornado Cash and Roman Storm were abiding by this guidance and following the law, and then all of a sudden there was a 180 on the definition, and that's what essentially this whole case was like predicated on. Yeah, that's what I understand, and I think overall it seems teed up to be successful for a strong appeal. And yeah, I mean, it really needs to be appealed because then it kind of like sets the precedent of like DeFi in general. If like, I mean, DeFi is all it would destroy the whole industry basically, and it's a little bit ridiculous to think that just facilitating a transaction, you're suddenly bound by this money transmission law. So, anyways, that's my non-lawyer take on that. So,
Yeah, Will, what do you think?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of uh, interesting precedent set both before and then, of course, by this. And a lot of it has to do with the context of the previous Biden administration, and then of course President Trump's administration being uh, more friendly to the blockchain industry. And so, yeah, you pointed that out perfectly, Joe, around basically some of these charges were kind of predicated, based on the previous administration. So it's going to be interesting to see the appeal process. And yeah, I think there was even a picture somebody got of Roman Storm like giving a thumbs up or something, walking out of uh, the courtroom or building in general. So I think he and of course his lawyers probably know that or are thinking that at least they got off of the two main charges, right, and then I'll deal with this third one. So it'll be interesting to see going forward. But I think kind of moving forward, there's two ways to look, or at least I look at it in through the lens of, or at least two ways. One of them is obviously for like investigators. By trade, I'm an investigator, and I've run into Tornado Cash in too many cases than I can care to remember, and have been frustrated and all of that. So looking at it, of course, through the lens of kind of enforcement and you know tracing illicit funds and things like that, and also enabling Lazarus Group and other bad actors to launder funds, but then also kind of moving forward what developers or how developers are going to use this precedent to continue building or build new things, whatever it might be. So I can kind of see where the Biden administration would want to set a precedent around these types of privacy protocols, um, and use things like 1960 or the Bank Secrecy Act. Uh, I think all of this is really just displaying more or less that all of these older laws. I think the Bank Secrecy Act was under Nixon, so 1970 or something like that. Those are maybe not the best ways to go about either enforcing or regulating or building regulation off of them to kind of go after the crypto community. It's obviously a much newer technology by 50, 60 years almost. So I think it should be a signal more than anything to regulators that, hey, we need to adjust to changing times. Same thing with developers, like I mentioned, bearing in mind that, like, yes, we should be able to create and build code and these really cool services or whatever you would want to call them, but bearing in mind that kind of generally speaking, we should probably be good people and try and not enable money laundering, especially to North Korea's nuclear program. So rather than kind of just like, you know, either A, chasing headlines or B, chasing a bag, like bear those things in mind. Like I truly think that Bitcoin and the crypto industry in general is a very good thing, and that they're doing a lot of really good things to bring a decentralized financial system to not only Americans in the U.S. but to the world. And so I think there's a huge opportunity for the industry to be able to help course correct a lot of um, what people are observing as like the traditional financial system eroding. So as these developers are starting to build and also see these legal precedents being set, and also the repercussions of building something like Tornado Cash or
Yeah.
whatever it might be, to just kind of bear that in mind, because yeah, governments are probably going to go after you for one, And for two, like, yeah, you have a responsibility, especially if you're a really good coder and build something, regardless of what you think of Tornado Cash, like the code is there, it will
Yeah.
be there, and so you kind of have a moral responsibility, at least in the way that I view it, to build responsibly.
Yeah, I definitely agree with those points because, like, I think I'll probably call it version 2 of what Tornado Cash currently looks like, at least for like zero knowledge proof protocols.
I
Like,
was just gonna, yeah,
yeah,
I was just gonna mention that. Go ahead.
they have a little bit of compliance in them, such that even if it's for privacy use cases, they still have this sort of like compliance stuff built into them that ensures like they are not just acting oblivious or just being blind to all of these illicit activities. Yeah, Jay, you want to say something?
No, yeah, I was just gonna mention that. I mean, I think Vitalik's talked about it a lot, and he's kind of involved a lot with Tornado Cash because I think he kind of suggested to Roman Storm to build it. So I think he feels pretty responsible for the situation. But like one of the things is hopefully eventually, maybe sooner than later, that ZK proofs could be applied, and this potentially is a possible solution to proving that people are legit users of a protocol and not illicit or illegal actors in any sort, with and remaining private. So this is really like an exciting thing that may come around soon enough, hopefully. Totally agree. Like, you definitely don't want to build something that it's just full uses, or the majority of use is just funding North Korea's nuclear program or any other sort of illicit actors. So, anyways, this could be, because there's so many new things evolving, and it's, going 100 miles an hour, new technologies, and that's part of the kind of like ethos of this whole new industry. And yeah, hopefully, like a positive solution that can come around. So I'm curious to see. I'll be keeping the eye out for that. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. We'll see how it goes. I think it's going to be like a little bit of like a long journey, especially when it gets to appeal and all of those stuff. There's still more on that case. And I think this is going to be like a very good um, time to talk about. I'll call it the OG before Tornado Cash, which has always been almost like every single sentence you talk about Monero, you're most likely talking about how illicit is being used. Yeah, it's kind of like almost in the same context of Tornado Cash, privacy, and illicit usage. The same thing also for Monero before Tornado Cash even became a thing. It was actually Monero. Is it that it's used for illicit activities or for privacy reasons? And very recently, I think last week or so, Cubic claimed that they now control over 51% of Monero's hash rate. And for everyone out there who actually doesn't understand 51% itself or Monero as a thing. Monero itself is also it's a blockchain with a token in itself, which sort of like um, anonymizes transactions that is coming into that particular blockchain and what is leaving the blockchain itself. So in a way, it's almost as similar to what Tornado Cash is seen as, but in this case, it is not a mixer. Generally, you refer to Tornado Cash as a mixer. Monero in this case is a it's a blockchain on its own with a token. The 51% itself, it's talking about how decentralized the particular blockchain itself is in terms of how many people have have uh, control over what is being decided as a block and all of the other decisions that you can make regarding that particular chain. One of the major attacks on blockchain that has always been in existence to talk about, if you don't know any, has always been 51% attack, where whoever controls 51% of the hash rates can eventually change a bunch of things and decide on which particular blocks to mine, which particular transaction to add to the block, or even rewrite the whole block in itself, right? So it has all of those. So essentially, it's just kind of saying one person controls it in a way. So that is what is happening on Monero right now. I don't have a lot to see on this one, to be honest, because I kind of feel like what is the essence of doing it. But I'll leave it to you guys. What exactly do you guys think? Joe, starting with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was just you don't hear about 51% tax too often because they're supposed to be really difficult to do. I think even Satoshi has mentioned that he thought it would be impossible for it to happen on Bitcoin. Bitcoin's a much bigger network, of course, so that would be much more difficult. Supposedly, this cubic mining pool, because yeah, Monero is a proof of work blockchain. They did it just to simply like stress test it. Apparently, that's what they're claiming, and to show that it's a real vulnerability like within privacy coins. I'm not really sure what the whole like mission or mind or like the why they did it, but they appeared to not have manipulated the chain because if you are successful in a 51% attack, you can technically like rewrite the data in it and the chain, and you could redistribute like who owns what, etc., and do a lot of malicious things. So it's good that apparently they didn't do this. It seems to be back. They don't have 51% control anymore, as far as I'm aware. But it is another like poke at Monero, and maybe it will create some like uncertainty to like use it from threat actors and kind of diminish its reputation. And maybe that can be a good thing for those who are investigating and fighting crypto crimes. So that could be a positive about it. So
What do you think, Will?
Yeah, I Monero's always been something that obviously as investigators we were pretty interested in. There was an article I forgot reading about, um, and it's like as an investigator, or generally like as a company, you either are interested in like the money side of things, making money and profitability and things like that, or like you just kind of stick to the things that you're interested about. And um, that's something that's always kind of like fascinated me because I always want to go chase the crazy stuff, like trying to trace stuff through Tornado Cash or researching around Monero. Um, and I wish I could do it more. But with that said, I always try and look at it like from now a little bit more of a lens of kind of like national security and analyzing through that. So it's super interesting that a company was able to kind of figure out how to potentially almost take over the is it hash rate? I'm not even
Yeah.
sure. I'm a big mining person. Um, Understand it generally, but you just have to always remember though at the back end of it. I think the market cap for Monero is something like it's over 5 billion. So it's like yes, you can launder money definitely through Monero, and I have plenty of cases where funds went into Monero and actually have some funny stories about like accidentally running into being able to trace, not being able to trace Monero, but like running into funds that the guy messed up. In one of the cases, he messed up and um, like deposited money back into his account
Yeah.
at an exchange, or deposited the Monero back in. We were like, what? We know this is definitely. Anyways, so that's all to say, like, yeah, you can launder money, obviously using Monero. But if you're the Lazarus Group, for instance, and you're trying to launder at a massive scale, like they kind of have, you can't do it through Monero. For one, you also probably now can't do it through Tornado Cash either. Um, so I'm looking at the Monero side of things through a kind of like the investigator's lens more than anything.
Mhm.
Um, and it's also expensive too. And a lot of people like unless you're doing some like pretty shady stuff, if you're pig butchering or some of the other things, like you're just going to try and launder funds as quickly as possible, probably send it over to some shady Chinese exchange and cash out. The cases and the people that are using Monero are like the real bad people, right? And then also just like your privacy. Um, I don't want to call them privacy freaks, but like they enjoy their
I was thinking the
privacy.
same word.
Yeah, so it's rare that I get to mess around with Monero, and even rarer that I see cases. I would say like less than 2, maybe 3% of cases that I see um, funds go to Monero. So I wish I could get into it more, and eventually maybe I will, but not super familiar, at least on the investigation side of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think one like from some of the cases that I've actually seen that has ended up in Monero has always been the egregious ones, specifically CSAM. And yeah, it's it's a very dark side of crypto, and I think that's like the aspect which I've seen it's more often. And like yeah, definitely. And I think this all stress test by Cubic in a way also speaks to how very unstable that particular chain is at this point. It's mean for someone to actually have 51 billion, oh sorry, 51%, essentially so it talks about how unsupported it is within the ecosystem. Because like for you to actually get that amount, it means like yeah, almost like maybe like a handful of people are actually mining and then trying to keep the blockchain active. So right, so well, we'll see. We'll see if someone else will come up tomorrow and then just how I say, yeah, we want to take over this, Joe.
Yeah, no, I was just thinking like what potentially law enforcement or the FBI or whoever can like pull together enough resources, like even maybe work with like Cubic Mining Pool, and like you could probably like take down the whole chain if you really wanted to, if there's really that much like illicit activity like going on. Like I don't know, just a random thought, but I suppose that could be possible because it shows it is possible to do this 51% attack. I don't know the exact like resources that would require. I'm sure it's plenty expensive, and it would require a lot of like organization and collaboration. But anyways, I mean, I guess it is a possibility at the end of the day. So I don't know. Some
I
that was
think,
just I was just thinking out loud. So yeah.
yeah, I agree. It's very possible because I think I was reading that it cost roughly less than 50 million to actually sustain that 51% attack per day. And yeah, I think for like government, depending on whatever they're actually after, 50 million, less than 50 million to spend on actually controlling a blockchain and possibly just rewrite everything. It wouldn't be like too much of it. So, yeah, we've heard of stories where uh governments operatives actually control darknet marketplaces. That's all like fronts themselves as the real thing. So yeah, it's obviously very possible, and I think we'll also keep an eye out on this particular one and see if something one bad guy actually comes out tomorrow and then actually do this thing that is being stress test, right? Um, so yeah, we'll take a pause on this and then come back for our last topic. Okay, welcome back to this episode on Truth and Theory with Ade and Joe. And like we mentioned at the beginning, we have a special guest who doesn't want to be called an expert. Will we still have him with us? So the last topic that we're going to just quickly talk about today is the Lubian Act, and I think this one has stayed under the radar for like so long, and in a way, it's I don't know how I feel about that 5 years later we're just getting to hear about it, and it's very 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 strange, and it talks about so many things. But let me just give you kind of like the backstory. So Lubian itself is a mining company that is based out of China, I believe. And recently, Arkham, which is a blockchain analytics firm, revealed that in December of 2020, the mining pool Lubian had around more than 120,000 BTC stolen, which was valued at 3.5 billion at the time, right? And that is like a lot. Currently, over around $14 billion right now. happens to be the biggest so far. Because if we are comparing this to the biggest as we know it right now, the Bybit, it's way, 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 way off mark in the real sense of it, right? So. Uh, there is so many on this case because number one, it happens to be that like Arkham were able to figure this out because some of the transactions that was carried out after the hack by Lubian was essentially like a message to the hacker and asking them to refund using the up return, right? And my initial thought was like I assume like all blockchain analytics firm actually scans all of the up return to get it out of it, right? Why has this gotten under the or flown under the radar for such a long time? But yeah, I would like to get your opinion on the act itself. The funds are still there, as far as I'm aware. It's just one of those instances where nobody is using it, but someone has lost a bunch. And I remember that there was actually like um a a news that Lubian was shutting down. But initially, then I thought it was because of the Chinese government and their what am I going to call it? Uh, just their political stance against crypto in China. That was my initial thoughts. But getting to know 5 years later that it was actually a hack, it's a little bit unsettling. What do you guys think? Start with I'll start with this time.
Yeah, yeah, super crazy, right? Like, a couple of years go by and nobody notices, or maybe just due again to the political um, climate in China that kind of doesn't allow them to get outside help. Really, they can't really go can't really go out and find it. But that's always an interesting thing that is, or at least something that I observe, where some sort of service, or in this case, a mining company that they suffer some sort of hack or loss, and then they don't go get help, or they don't handle on the PR side, you know, talking to customers, users, whatever it might be. And it's just like the worst thing you could possibly do. Um, and a good example of like good PR and good response was the Bybit hack. And I remember whenever that happened, all the little group chats that investigators are all in, like, just started blowing up, and everyone was very willing to help and kind of protect the industry, and some of the funds were able to get recovered, and it is obviously situational when it comes to those sort of things. But I think um, generally, the industry is really friendly and wants to help out, and things like that. And again, um, I don't know if it's just the political climate, or certain things that they just can or cannot do. But with the Lubian thing, like, yeah, everybody missed it or didn't notice, or for whatever reason. But now everybody, noticed. I think if you go look at the wallet where dormant funds are sitting, you can see a bunch of what I'm assuming to be, dusting attacks. Like, everyone's hoping, you never know when you can get lucky. And I've even tried that before with, like, a variety of different things, but there's ways you can automate it, large whales, and just send dusting attacks. I think even once the U.S. Marshal Service fell for it, and I think they sent 50K back to a drug dealer or something.
Yeah.
So, anyways, that's all to say, like, yeah, I didn't even know what to think, really. Just like, yeah, how do you do that? And of course, obviously, I think people, there was some analysis done generally on the on the attack, and like, how did it happen? And you see this. It's just like very sloppy. I don't want to call it OPSEC, but like just sloppy infrastructure, sloppy processes, and things like that. And we saw that with the Bybit hack, Bybit hack, and I don't want to even call it a hack 'cause it sounds like they did something super technical, social engineering. But it can sometimes be like the most simplest things that lead to, I mean, like a $15 billion loss. I would be hiring some really good developers to build infrastructure and security around all of that stuff.
Yeah. Go ahead,
Yeah, it's
Joe.
crazy. Yeah, no, it's right. Sometimes you almost forget to like. Sometimes you almost get like lost in all the numbers. Like, yeah, you're right. Like, if you really reflect on it, 15 billion is insane, and it's just sitting there with, who knows who owns it. It's crazy, but yeah, I guess, yeah, it's in a few. The thing that came to my mind, like first off, was just kind of like thinking about what else is unknown out there. I mean, obviously you can contextualize it has a explanation that it is in the Chinese market, like, and kind of like a modern day Iron Curtain that there's a big firewall there and just stuff we don't hear about. But it does make me reflect a bit because you hear this from a lot of analysis firms of like only 1% of transaction are illicit. I even hear non-firms. I hear a lot of like pro crypto proponents like saying this, and it's just like I think people should stop saying this because it doesn't really reflect the accuracy of the situation on a couple fronts. Like first of all, obviously we don't know all transactions. Like it's this is what's been made clear. Like if this had sits dormant for 5 years with this amount of money, yeah, I mean, it's pretty clear that we don't know like all transactions and whether or not they're illicit or not. Like that's hard to decipher. But and then secondly, like transaction volume isn't really an accurate way of measuring it. Like it just takes one or two. I think this was what, one or two transactions, and 14 billion were stolen. So it's not transaction volume that commits damage. It's the amount in the amount that can a ton 15 billion can go in one transaction. Anyways, just something I've been thinking about, and I think maybe like the industry can think a little more diligently about that line. Yeah, I don't. Yeah, blockchain and transactions, for as much as I think it does a lot of good, it probably does more than this like 1% transaction or illicit sort of like ethos or meaning it's trying to convey that like, oh, it's this real small thing. It's not some small thing. It's really big actually. There's a lot of theft and illicit activity going on. So, anyways, that
Yeah,
was kind of my takeaway. Yeah.
a quick interjection. You're kind of right, and there's a lot of different ways, right, that you can measure um, illicit activity, and I don't even know if that's the right way to like categorize in general. Like you mentioned, I think you have to look at obviously a lot of other factors, and one of my bigger research projects that I'm working on for BPI. It's going to coincide with UNODC conference later this year, but um, there's a lot of different ways and a lot of variables that you obviously have to include. It's a lot of data analysis, and it's like building an annoying formula to visualize and graph, uh, and measure all of these things. But one things that I am specifically going to focus on this like specific topic that you mentioned is the actual bad actors that we see. So kind of, I guess I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a preview, but the way that I'm going to look at it is almost do not a categorization, but cataloging bad actors, because the way that I kind of look at it, it's like, yes, you can measure, which a lot of blockchain analytics providers give all of this data and things like that, and it is helpful, and I will include that. But one of the things that I'm specifically going to look at is like, who are the bad actors? And there's an organization that I work with called Security Alliance. They're CLISAC, CL 911. They
Yeah.
have all of these umbrella organizations, and they're really great. And they build data and have really helped out the community in a lot of different ways. But one of the things that I'm working on is again cataloging like bad actors, like how what bad actors are doing bad things that are
Mm.
making the industry, like, gives people a bad taste in their mouth because they see all of these headlines. And it's like, well, you have the Lazarus Group, right? That um, volume wise is probably some of your worst thieves in the industry. And then it's like pretty close to them in volume is pig butchering and some stuff that's coming out of obviously Southeast Asia. Um, and on top of that, on top of like the loss value that it's causing to primarily Western countries, is the obviously the underlying kind of conditions there, and the human trafficking and things like that. So that's also, obviously really really bad, and the loss value is pretty high, very high. In fact, I think it's way higher than DPRK. So, anyways, those are two examples of like, okay, we have both. Both of those now that we're finding out more and more about pig butchering and stuff's coming out with links to like the Cambodian royal family and things like that. But those are like examples of
Yeah.
state actors and stuff. So, but then also you have for instance, um, potentially a non-state actor taking down Lubian. We don't know yet. We'll hopefully find out more as we come. But I want to look at it through the lens of like specific bad actors, because if you think about it, like these larger loss volume um, bad actors, like it could be like I mentioned, pig butchering, or it could be specifically the DPRK Lazarus Group. Like I think we should look at it contextually through that lens, because they're the ones doing the most damage when it comes to the industry. And so I think we need to get really specific about how we can address those problems. And obviously that's why tornado cash is a big thing. And we were talking about that, but I definitely want to give more insight into like some of these bigger players, bigger actors that are affecting the industry and affecting people, rather than just like looking at the broad numbers
Yeah.
of things. And that way we can start getting targeted as investigators, and as and further down, at least the next ring of compliance folks at exchanges, and we can try and address these issues one by one. Because right now it's fragmented, right? Like I'm
Mm.
doing, or CLISAC maybe is doing a bunch of research on DPRK, and then you have folks like Operation Shamrock, doing all this work with pig butchering. So it's like we can kind of combine and condense a lot of this data, and then make it available to policymakers and all of those folks like at BPI. And what we're trying to do there, trying to combine all of this and condense it and then regurgitate it out so that it's a little bit easier to digest, and it's not super technically heavy, and we can kind of get our points across. It's kind of the goal, and that's what this bigger research is geared towards. And hopefully we can again pick out the topics and the bad actors and go after them.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's a little long ramble.
No, no. No, not at all. I, I actually I get your point, and I think a way to put it also, because like as you're saying that, I was sort of also thinking of it from like a Web2 perspective. Generally, you don't you don't say 50% of the funds in the financial institutions or financial industry is illicit. Generally, you probably just kind of like attach in a way reference those funds to the bad actors. Oh, this is how much that has been stolen by state-sponsored actors. Oh, this is how much that has been lost to us somewhere, right? In that regard, and then you focus more on figuring out the TTP of those specific typologies or those hackers or threat actors themselves, which actually makes a lot of sense because in a way it's two ways to look at it, because like when we say 5% of crypto is illicit, Because looking at that from down go, it's all like, oh yeah, we are good. 95% of is very nice. And then from a flip side of it, someone would actually say, oh, 5% is actually too high, which means everybody in crypto is actually doing something wrong. So in a way, if everybody is sort of like being leveraged or being judged based on those numbers and not the actors, it's as if the actors are kind of like just having a chill day by the seaside and just like, okay, you know what? They're saying we are not doing that much, so we should do more. Which actually makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Oh, okay, nice. Like, yeah, you want to say something on that, Joe?
Oh, no, no, I agree on all those points, and yeah, nothing to add. So all good.
Cool, cool. And I think that's sort of like how much you can take today. We've discussed a lot of things, and this last conversation is actually something to really think more of because I think numbers in this space has always been a very big discussion points, especially when everybody's putting out numbers, maybe to sort of like support their tool or whatever the case may be. Yeah, numbers are very opinionated. I'll call it that. But yeah, thank you so much for coming on board, William. We really really appreciate it. Yeah, down the line, we would obviously love to have you back on this podcast, discuss other things still related to crypto. To also, yeah, thank you, my co-host Jill. I think I don't thank you enough. So yeah, thank you, and like yeah, thank you also to our listeners for staying to this end. I hope you've gotten one or two things from all of the stuff we've discussed. And like we always say, demystifying the crypto space has always been our goal. And hopefully you know more than you do before the start of this program. So yeah, thank you guys and peace.